Okay, hi, and welcome back to our talk about Ironheart multiplayer that's now live on Backerkit. In part one, we had a bit of a look at the world of Ironheart and about playing your characters. And in this part, we're going to take a bit of a dive into the character sheets and the stats. So, Charlie's with me today.
Hello?
Charlie, can you explain a bit about how in Ironheart multiplayer you discussed before you play two characters, your pilot and your mech. So, how does that work on the character sheets and with your stats?
So on the character sheet, it's a mirror is kind of what you're looking at between the two characters. So on the left-hand side, you have the pilot represented in blue, and on the right-hand side, you have the mech represented in pink. So each of those have four attributes that are mirrors of one another, and these are the attributes that you're rolling checks against, depending on what the heart, your GM, asks you to do. So for example, say my pilot needs to do press ups, or kind of punch somebody at the bar who's kind of that said something rude. That's going to be a body check. And likewise for my mech, if they're having to hold up a building that's collapsing, or kind of use a melee weapon, for example, that would be a mech brawn check, and they sit opposite one another on the character sheet. So we have four attributes for each that have that mirroring. So for pilots, you have pilot body and you have mech brawn. You then have pilot agility, you have mech reflex, you have pilot charisma, mech presence, and then you finally have pilot mind, and then you have mech tech. So those are kind of those mirrored elements. They're not exactly the same, because obviously what your mech can do is very different to what your pilot can do, but it gives you that lovely link point between your pilot and mech of how they can influence one another's actions.
So does that make it that you could almost make the pilot a mech representation of yourself? If you're a fast, quick character who wants to scout around, you could make your mech in that way. But also you could build a more upfront fisticuffs first character and have your mech example to that. Or the opposite and have your mech be polar opposite to you.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yes. So you could build a mech that is a really good mirror of who your character is, to kind of have that almost that again, that reflected mirror image of yourself, of a personality that through how they're connected together is a nice mirror of yourself. You can, however, build mechs that are vastly different from your character and kind of have more of an odd couple dynamic, which can be really fun as well, which can be interesting because rather than being unified and being good in singular things, it means your mech is slightly better in other areas where your pilot is weak. So you can kind of create interesting roleplay scenarios where you can balance one another out.
Okay, and is there a way for you to work your mech and your pilot together to use both your skills? So let's say my pilot has a great mind score.
Yeah.
Can I tie that into my mech's tech skill or their brawn to make them work together to be kind of better than the sum of their parts almost?
Absolutely. So let's kind of role play like a really quick check, and I'll kind of explain it that way. So say your pilot is trying to hack into a signal, for example, and they're using tech that they have at hand. I'd say that would be a pilot mind check. Say they've got two in that attribute, so they'd be rolling 2d6, and we'd be looking for 4 pluses, and those would be successes. If I was struggling a little bit, and I wanted to kind of bring in my mech to help me out, I could say, as the pilot, I'd like to hook in some cables and use my mech's kind of big bat ears as a radar dish to amplify my signal. And I'd say, that's great. That is kind of using your mech tech. So I could roll using the mech instead. If I wanted to roll them together, I could spend what's called a sync bond point in order to merge elements of those pools together and roll more dice and have a bigger chance of success.
So sync bond, so that returns from Ironheart Solo.
Yes.
Correct? Mm-hmm. And it was the growth of the connection of your character and your mech as they grew together on their journey. So that's here in Ironheart multiplayer, and how does that work exactly?
So it has similarities. So it is the same conceptually of that. You're completely right. It's the bond between your pilot and mech, and how elements of your pilot's personality is kind of imprinting on that emerging personality of your mech. In terms of how that comes across in gameplay, we still have that element of basically being able to merge roles together, so you can spend that sync bond point and merge basically pools from the mech side and the pilot side, smash them together and roll more dice. But it can also be used in a variety of different ways now. So if you roll ones, for example, in your dice pool, they count as malfunctions, which can cancel out successes. So sync bond points can be spent there to re-roll those and try and cancel those out. You can also spend them on special abilities, such as heroic actions and other elements in the game to trigger stuff that's a lot more powerful, where it is going to require your pilot and your mech to work together in synchronicity in order to kind of achieve that. In terms of how it's so there's a few more like mechanical elements that are being added in multiplayer in terms of how you work with sync bond, but we've taken that idea of sync bond a bit further by introducing team fusion, and this is how your team is synchronized together, which is something we're really excited about in the game.
Very cool. So team fusion, that's your Power Rangers mega morphing together, all working, all the mechs fighting for the same kind of goal. Yeah. So how does that work? How does that work in the game then? So we trigger our team fusion. What happens?
So it can work in a variety of ways. So it's a 12-point tracker, so you can kind of bank 12 fusion points as a team. So it's a shared resource at any time. You can spend singular points if you're making rolls together as a group. If someone's having a hard time with that roll, you can decide as a group to spend one of those points to allow them to re-roll and contribute and hopefully gain some successes. You can basically fill up the entire meter, and that's actually how you bank a level up, so you grow better as a team and your mech and pilot become better through teamwork. Or you can fill up your meter, and rather than bank a level up, say we're fighting against a big boss mech or a kaiju, and it's getting really, really fraught, you can cash in your team fusion meter so that everyone gets a big Power Ranger team up style moment where everyone immediately gets a turn out of combat order, and you can basically play that however you like and have a real awesome moment of teamwork together. So got a lot of similarities to sync bond, but it is a lot more to do with how your team is working together than how your pilot's individually working with your mech.
Okay, great. So also on the character sheets, I see we have weapon slots, which you've got mods, you've got chassis, you've got auxiliaries. I assume these things you're going to plug onto your mech to power them up.
Yes. So this is a kind of the range of equipment that you can attach to your mech throughout the game. Often it's stuff that you can kind of buy or be rewards for the kind of stories that you're completing. So the way we've tried to keep it nice and customizable, but also quite simple. Of that, you have like your main 4 slots, which are your melee weapon, your ranged weapon, your auxiliary system. So again, really similar to Solo. We also wanted to add in chassis to kind of give like more of a general element of like modifying like the body of your mech. So you can equip certain items kind of in here. So a bit like, if you're picking up your plasma sword and your railgun, that's your kind of melee weapon. And your ranged weapon, and you could have like a booster pack, for example, like a jetpack could be your auxiliary system. Where this gets really kind of fun is something that we've added in that's new, which is mods. So modifications. So these are things that adapt and change your weapons, your auxiliaries, your chassis slots to have additional effects. And some of these are universal, some of these specific to those slots. But what we want people to kind of have really fun with doing is when you're designing your loadouts for your mech, is make it so you can reshuffle that deck of what's there really, really easily, and have lots of fun combinations. It's also great if you're coming up against an encounter that you're finding really difficult and your group needs to retreat. You can go back to the settlement, go to the mech workshop, strap on some new weapons, swap out some mods, maybe exchange some with your friends as well, of being like, actually, I found this and I thought it would be good for me, but it's working for you, and play that encounter through again. So it provides that tactical nuance, but makes it really accessible as well.
Okay, very cool. And there's also on the character sheet some more. So there's some other abilities that are splattered through that look to be much more, I'd say, role play related.
Yes.
So things like your battle scars and your post-war specializations.
Yes.
Do you want to explain that a bit?
Yes, so for kind of role play abilities, you get some of that through the pilot creation process. So I think your pilot goal gives you some abilities that you can use in more of a role play fashion. Heroic actions are making a return, so we had those in Ironheart Solo. They work kind of slightly differently now, and you can attain more through the leveling up process. Battle scars are interesting. So if your mech gets downed, like not necessarily kind of killed, but gets back up again, we wanted there to be some consequence for that, of like letting your mech shielding go to 0, so you attain what's called a battle scar. So this is something that will kind of add a quirk, a bit of a malfunction to your mech, like something they're carrying with them for a while until that can get healed or that issue can be resolved, to kind of just make it feel like there is a real consequence for letting your mech get that heavily damaged. And then finally, post-war specialization. This is something we had in Ironheart Solo as well, but kind of wanted to add a little bit more kind of mechanical weight to this, because the whole theme of this game is about how do people who have been fighting in a war reintegrate into civilian life and find that peace. And having a post-war specialization for their mech is all about how these very freshly minted weapons of war that have been fighting for so long can actually jump back into the world. So they have a mechanical use, but they're also fantastic for providing role-play abilities for doing that as well.
Perfect. So it sounds like that's everything covered on the character sheets.
I think so.
So we'll call it there and check back in for part 3, when we're going to do a couple of checks and go through a couple of roles and look at how that works in practice.